Hey there, this is Joy, and today I'm excited to join Altenew for the October 2023 Marvelous Monthly Release video hop. You can see the description as well as refer to my blog for the complete list of products. I die cut the images from Nina Solar White 110 pounds cardstock using the Crafter Flower Rhododendron Die Set. I inked the 3rd and 7th layer of the flower using Citrus Burst dye ink. I repeated the process one more time, and then I inked the edges of the 7th layer using Honey Drizzle dye ink. I inked the base of all the petals using Citrus Burst dye ink along with an ink blending tool. I repeated the process one more time. Next, I inked the top portion of all the petals using Heartbeat ink. I applied the ink darker at the edges and lighter on the inner portion of the petals. To ensure a smooth and pain-free ink blending, hold the brush gently and always use your shoulder to create the movement instead of your wrist. I then used Vineyard Berry dye ink to ink the edges of the petals. When I want to ink only the edges, I like to tilt my blending brush as this helps me to apply the ink on a smaller portion of the die cut. You can either tilt the brush towards the petal or away from it. Try both and see which one works for you. You can also use the detail blending brush to ink blend instead of the mini ink blending brush that I have used to ink the petals. After that, I used Rhododendron dye ink along with the detail blending brush to add shadows on the petals. I applied this color to a few areas to create depth and add dimension to the petals. Always remember to wipe down your work surface in between each color, as this can affect your ink blending, especially if you have used a darker ink and then use a lighter one. Then I applied Vineyard Berry dye ink on all the petals, followed by Heartbeat dye ink. I repeated all the steps one more time. Then I splattered Autumn Blaze and Ruby Red watercolors on the 3rd layer of the flowers. I gently squeezed the barrel to get the watercolor out on a clear block. Next, I flicked the tip of the brush on the edge of the block to splatter the color on the petals. I repeated these steps with Ruby Red watercolor, and then I set the petals aside to dry. You can also tap the brush on the clear block to splatter the color. Then I used the crimson pen from the Hawaiian Shores dual tip pens to color the anthers. I outlined the area that I needed to color and then filled it in with the color. I started by coloring the highlights of the leaves using Parrot dye ink. Then I applied just green ink from the other side of the leaves, followed by hunter green. I stuck a postage sheet on my fingers to protect them from getting inked as well as to avoid accidentally smudging the ink on the die cuts. For the shadow portion of the leaves, I used green onyx dye ink. I repeated the entire process 2 more times. After that, I ink the highlighted portion using citrus burst dye ink, as this helps to brighten the leaves. I place the die cut pieces on my mat as per the layering guide and assemble the flower. If you accidentally apply too much glue on your die cut piece, you can dab the excess on a postage sheet or scrap paper. I placed the Linear Crossroads die on a mirror cardstock and ran it through my die cutting machine. I repeated this process 1 more time. If you have excess cardstock, you can use a craft knife and run it through the edges of the die cut piece to clean it out. Sometimes I also place the die cut on my finger and gently scrape it. Remember to always use the craft knife on the back of the die cut piece. I use the coordinating die to die cut the sentiment from jet black cardstock. Then I remove the inner die cut piece, place the die on it and place the stamp set on the die. The stamp should lock in place. Once it does, you can lift the stamp up with the lid of the stamp platform and remove the die. Next, I applied embossing powder on the cardstock to remove any static. Then I inked the stamp set using embossing ink. I like to tap the ink pad on the stamp set as this gives me a crisper image. I then sprinkled antique gold embossing powder on it, tapped off the excess and heat set it. After that, I placed a black A2 cardstock in the Masonry wall 3D embossing folder and ran it through my die cutting machine. Next, I stuck it on an A2 card base. Then I stuck the Linear Crossroads die cut on a few random places on the cardstock. If you accidentally apply liquid glue on your card panel, you can let it dry and then use the eraser to remove it. I then stuck the flowers and the leaves on the card front. I used foam tape to stick the flower in the foreground. After that, I sprayed water on the Enchanted Gold metallic watercolor to activate it. Then I picked up the color with my round brush and splattered it on the card front. Next, I put a dot of titanium white on my work surface and sprayed some water on it. Then I used a round brush to splatter it on the cardstock. You can splatter as much or as little color as you want. The card that you saw at the beginning of this video has less splatter than this one. I then stuck a layer of foam tape on the sentiment and then stuck the sentiment on the card panel. Here are the 2 cards I made. I always make a sample card before I make my video. Which one do you like better? Are you team more splatter or team less splatter? Let me know in the comments below. I hope this video inspires you to create, and if it does, please tag me. I would love to see your projects. Thank you so much for joining me today. I look forward to seeing you next week. Until then, live creatively and spread the joy of handmade art.